The stars twinkled against the deep black of space as the UES Frontier glided silently through the void. Captain Alan Wright sat in the command chair, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. The year was 2087, and humanity had finally achieved what generations had only dreamed of: faster-than-light travel. "All systems nominal, Captain," said Lieutenant Paul Davis from the pilot station. "We're approaching the target star system." Captain Wright nodded. At 45, he had spent half his life preparing for this moment, to be the first human to venture beyond the solar system. His crew of 24 represented Earth's finest: scientists, engineers, and explorers chosen from across the globe. "Dropping out of FTL in 3 and 2-1, announced Davis. The stars on the view screen shifted as the Frontier returned to normal space. A yellow sun burned in the distance, and orbiting it was a blue-green planet that looked eerily like Earth. "My God," whispered Dr. Jane Wilson, the ship's exobiologist. "The readings are showing oxygen, nitrogen. It's habitable." Wright allowed himself a small smile. Their first target system, and already they'd found a potentially habitable world. But his smile faded quickly when sensors detected something else: artificial structures in orbit around the planet. "Captain, I'm picking up multiple objects in orbit," said Security Chief Greg Harris, his voice tight. "They're massive. Largest is about 20 times our size." Before Wright could respond, the communication system crackled to life. "Unknown vessel, you have entered territorial space of the Axioni Empire. Identify yourself immediately or face destruction." The crew looked to Wright, who straightened his uniform and nodded to Communications Officer Linda Martinez. "This is Captain Alan Wright of the United Earth ship Frontier. We are a peaceful exploration vessel from the planet Earth." There was a long pause before the response came. "Earth vessel, remain in position. You will be boarded and inspected." Within minutes, a sleek silver ship approached the Frontier. It was unlike anything humans had ever built. Smooth, with no visible engines or weapons, yet it moved with incredible precision. Lieutenant Samantha Miller, the expedition's chief diplomat, stood beside Wright as they watched alien beings materialize on their bridge. They were tall, blue-skinned humanoids with 4 arms and large violet eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "I am Commander Grek of the Axioni Defense Fleet," said the tallest one. His voice sounded odd, as if multiple people were speaking at once. "You claim to be from Earth, Sector 72291, Planet 4. Wright nodded. "That's correct." Grek made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Impossible. Earth species are classified as pre-FTL, Category 4 Developing World." Miller stepped forward. "With respect, Commander, we achieved FTL capability 3 months ago." The aliens exchanged glances, communicating in clicks and whistles too fast for the translation software to follow. "You will accompany us to Axion Prime," Grek finally said. "The Council must be informed." 2 days later, after traveling through what the Axioni called fold space, the Frontier arrived at Axion Prime. Wright stared in awe at the massive ring world that circled a binary star system. Cities sprawled across its inner surface, home to billions of beings from hundreds of species. The Axioni Council chamber was a vast dome with seats for 300 representatives. High Administrator Zyrex, a tall, thin being with golden skin and 6 eyes arranged in a circle on its face, looked down at the human delegation from a raised platform. "So Earth has achieved space-folding technology," Zyrex said, his tone making it clear this was not a pleasant surprise. "Most unexpected. The predictive models gave you another century at minimum." Council member Trillax, a squat creature with rocky skin, thumped her heavy arm on the table. "We should implement immediate quarantine protocols. Humans are unpredictable. They've advanced too quickly." Miller, who had been chosen to speak for Earth, raised her hand. "With respect, Council, we come in peace. We seek only knowledge and friendship." Zyrex's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. "The Council will deliberate. You will be given temporary accommodations while we decide how to proceed." As guards led them to guest quarters, Miller noticed how other species moved away from them in the corridors. "They're afraid of us," she whispered to Wright. Why would anyone fear humans? Wright replied. We're technologically centuries behind them. Their quarters were comfortable but clearly designed for surveillance. Miller immediately began working diplomatic channels, requesting formal meetings with council members. After 3 days of persistence, she secured a provisional embassy status for the human delegation. Meanwhile, Major John Carter and Science Officer Dr. Lisa Brown found ways to access public information terminals. What they discovered was troubling. The Empire has been watching Earth for over 500 years, Brown told Wright one night, her voice low even though they were using scramblers to defeat listening devices. They've had observation posts in our solar system since the 1500s. Carter nodded grimly. And that's not all. Look at this classification. He showed them a data tablet displaying a biological profile of humans. Species shows unusual adaptability and cognitive flexibility. Wright read aloud. Exhibits unpredictable decision-making patterns and innovation capabilities beyond statistical norms. Potential category, destabilizing influence. Miller frowned. They've been deliberately preventing contact with us until we developed FTL ourselves. It's like they were containing us. Over the next few weeks, Miller built diplomatic bridges while the rest of the crew gathered intelligence. They learned that the Axioni Empire spanned nearly a third of the Milky Way, encompassing over 300 species in a strict hierarchy based on technological achievement and predictability factors. Earth was granted limited trade rights, and cultural exchanges began. Human music and art caused a sensation among the younger Axioni, while Earth eagerly absorbed knowledge about medicine and physics that jumped human understanding forward by decades. 6 months after first contact, Wright was recalled to Earth for consultation. He left Miller in charge of the embassy while Harris accompanied him back on the frontier. They're hiding something, Wright told the United Earth Council in Geneva. They treat us like we're both fascinating and dangerous. Their military watches our every move. President Joe Rivera nodded slowly. We've been building more ships based on what we've learned. But there's a huge technology gap. Sir, said Wright, I believe we need to be very careful. The Axioni Empire has conquered galaxies by bringing species into their fold, or eliminating those that don't fit. Back on Axion Prime, Miller was making progress with younger council members who found humans intriguing rather than threatening. But Imperial military commanders continued to warn Zyrex about human unpredictability. They don't follow logical patterns. Admiral Kraz insisted during a closed session that Miller's hidden recording devices captured. Their history is filled with individuals making choices that defied optimal outcomes, but succeeded anyway. They're dangerous. 8 months after first contact, the fragile piece shattered. A human research vessel studying an unusual nebula near Alpha Centauri reported being approached by Imperial ships before all communication ceased. When Earth demanded an explanation, the Axioni claimed the vessel had violated a restricted zone and had been destroyed when it attempted hostile actions. Recovered debris told a different story. The ship had been fired upon without warning. Across Earth and its new colonies on Mars and Europa, protests erupted. The Axioni military began preparation for what internal documents called containment procedures for the human problem. The first interstellar war involving humanity was about to begin, and the mighty Axioni Empire had no idea what they were about to face. 5 years passed since first contact. Humanity had spread beyond Earth, establishing 12 new colonies on distant worlds. What had once seemed impossible was now routine, as human ships traveled between stars. On each colony, tall communication towers sent messages back to Earth, their blinking lights visible from orbit. Admiral Susan Taylor stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, the largest warship in Earth's new space defense force. At 53, her hair had gone gray, but her eyes remained sharp. Through the viewport, she watched as her fleet of 50 ships performed practice maneuvers near Jupiter. Status report, she said to her second-in-command, Captain Ben Riley. All ships in formation, Admiral. Weapon systems at 85% efficiency. Taylor nodded. The ships looked impressive, but she knew they were like toys compared to Axioni vessels. Earth had copied some alien technology, but the Empire kept their best secrets hidden. "The Axioni ambassador is requesting permission to board, Admiral," said Communications Officer Diane Foster. Taylor straightened her uniform. Permission granted. Ambassador Zelk was tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to shimmer under the ship's lights. He moved with the careful precision that all Axioni showed around humans, as if afraid of sudden movements. "Admiral Taylor," he said with a slight bow. "The Empire wishes to express concern about your military exercises." Taylor kept her face neutral. "Just routine training, Ambassador. We have no hostile intentions." "Of course not," Zelk replied, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence. "The Empire values its peaceful relationship with Earth." After the ambassador left, Riley stepped closer to Taylor. He seemed nervous. "They're always nervous around us," Taylor replied. "They can't predict what we'll do, and that scares them." Thousands of light years away on a small planet near the edge of Axioni space, human trader Eric Hudson was loading his ship with local spices that fetched high prices on Earth. His ship, the Lucky Star, was small but fast, perfect for the trading routes he had established. As he prepared for takeoff, his scanner picked up unusual signals from the ocean nearby. Curious, Hudson changed course to investigate. What he found stunned him. Hidden beneath the waves were massive Axioni mining platforms, extracting rare minerals from the ocean floor. Hudson checked his maps again. This planet was in neutral space, but the ocean bed was similar to Earth's. The realization hit him hard. The Axioni were testing mining techniques here that they planned to use on Earth. Hudson recorded everything his sensors could detect, then left quickly before the Imperial ships noticed him. 3 weeks later, he landed on Earth and immediately requested a meeting with government officials. President William Garcia listened carefully as Hudson showed the evidence on a large screen in the Oval Office. The room was silent except for Hudson's voice. "They're developing specialized equipment to extract neodymium and dysprosium from deep ocean trenches," Hudson explained. "The test site has almost identical conditions to the Mariana Trench on Earth." Admiral Taylor, who had been called to the meeting, pointed to a section of the data. "These are the same areas where our deep-sea monitoring stations have been reporting disturbances." The president's face darkened. "They've already started on Earth?" Intelligence Director Andy Phillips nodded grimly. "It appears so, sir. We've detected unusual activity in deep ocean regions for months, but couldn't identify the cause. This violates every agreement we have with the Empire," said Secretary of State Maria Johnson. "They're extracting our resources without permission or payment." President Garcia stood up, his decision made. "Prepare a formal protest to the Imperial Council. We demand they withdraw all mining operations from Earth's territory within 30 days, or there will be serious consequences. When Earth's ultimatum reached the Imperial Council on Axion Prime, High Administrator Zyrex dismissed it immediately. "This is absurd," he told the council members. "Hudson's evidence is clearly fabricated. We have no secret mining operations on Earth." Council member Neelix, younger and more sympathetic to humans, spoke up. "Should we at least investigate these claims? Humans seem genuinely angry." Zyrex's 6 eyes narrowed. "The Empire does not justify itself to lesser species. We will respond, with a demonstration of strength to remind humans of their place." 3 days later, a battle group of 20 Imperial warships appeared near Mars, their weapon systems active. The message from Admiral Kraz was brief. Earth will withdraw its baseless accusations or face discipline. On Earth, the Security Council met in emergency session. Admiral Taylor presented her assessment. "We're outgunned at least 3-1, she said bluntly. "Their ships have shields and weapons we can't match." "Can we negotiate more time?" asked the Secretary of Defense. Taylor shook her head. "They're not here to negotiate. This is a show of force meant to make us back down." "President." Garcia looked around the table. "Options? Fight," said Taylor. "They expect us to surrender because that's what logical beings would do against superior force. We need to surprise them." 24 hours later, Admiral Taylor's fleet of 50 ships formed a protective line between Mars and the Imperial battle group. Her flagship, the Defender, moved to the front. "This is Admiral Susan Taylor of the United Earth Space Defense Force," she broadcast on all frequencies. "Axioni vessels have entered restricted space without permission. Withdraw immediately." "Admiral," Kroz's laughter came through the speakers. "You have no concept of the power you face, human. Surrender now or be destroyed." Taylor cut the transmission and turned to her tactical officer. "Initiate Operation Slingshot." What happened next would later be studied in Imperial war colleges for decades. Instead of engaging directly, Taylor's ships performed a complex series of maneuvers that seemed chaotic and illogical to Imperial tacticians. Some Earth vessels accelerated toward Mars, others toward the Sun, appearing to flee in panic. The Imperial ships, following standard combat doctrine, divided to pursue what they saw as easy targets. This was exactly what Taylor had planned for. Using the gravity wells of Mars and Earth, along with carefully timed bursts through the Sun's radiation belts, maneuvers the Empire's engineers had deemed irrational and suicidal, Taylor's ships executed attacks from impossible angles. 7 Earth vessels were destroyed, but they took 3 Imperial dreadnoughts with them, ships that had never been defeated in combat. The battle lasted only 4 hours before the remaining Imperial ships retreated, jumping back to Axioni space. On the Defender's bridge, the crew cheered, but Taylor remained somber. "This isn't a victory," she told them quietly. "It's the beginning of a war." On Axion Prime, the Imperial Council was in an uproar. Admiral Kroz had been executed for his failure, but the damage was done. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Empire had been defeated in battle by what they considered an inferior species. "They caught us unprepared," Zyrex told the angry council. "One victory means nothing. We have conquered galaxies. We will not be humbled by primitives." Intelligence Officer Kate Reynolds, working undercover in the Imperial capital, discovered the Empire's response plan through carefully placed sources. They were preparing planet cracker weapons, city-destroying bombs to be deployed against Earth's major population centers as a demonstration of Imperial power. Reynolds knew she had to act. Using a secure channel, she sent the information not just to Earth, but to representatives of all species in the Empire. Many were shocked by the disproportionate response planned against humans. The Nera, a peaceful species who had been Imperial subjects for centuries, were the first to refuse cooperation. Their ambassador announced publicly that no Nera ships would participate in the human campaign. The Vesh master engineers responsible for maintaining Imperial weapon systems began subtle acts of sabotage. As Imperial forces mobilized for what they expected to be a swift punitive action against Earth, they faced something unprecedented: resistance from within. For the first time in millennia, the absolute authority of the Empire was being questioned. The war had only just begun, but already the foundations of Imperial power were starting to crack. 1 year into the war, Admiral Frank Daniel stood on the bridge of his ship, the UES Phantom. At 38, he was younger than most admirals, but his success in guerrilla tactics had earned him command of Earth's Special Operations Fleet. "Status. Report," he said to his second-in-command, Commander Amy Foster. "All ships cloaked and in position, sir," she replied. "Imperial patrol ships will pass this sector in 5 minutes." Daniels nodded. They were deep in Imperial territory, hiding in an asteroid belt near an important fuel processing station. His fleet of 15 ships was small, but each vessel was equipped with advanced stealth technology reverse-engineered from captured Imperial scout ships. "Remember," he told his crew, "hit fast, hit hard, and disappear before they can respond." When the Imperial patrol passed, they saw nothing unusual. As soon as they were gone, Daniels gave the order: "All ships, execute Operation Thunderbolt." The Earth vessels decloaked simultaneously and launched missiles at the fuel station. Before Imperial defenders could respond, Daniels's fleet had recloaked and changed position. The station exploded in a massive fireball that could be seen from planets in nearby systems. "Jump points calculated," reported Navigator Jeff Wilson. "Ready to return to Earth space." "Not yet," said Daniels with a small smile. "Let's hit their communication relay in the next system first. They'll never expect us to strike twice so close together." Back on Earth, in a heavily protected underground facility, Dr. Olivia Martin led the reverse engineering division. Her team worked day and night to understand Imperial technology and find its weaknesses. "Look at this," she said to her assistant, showing him a holographic display of an Imperial shield generator. "Their systems are perfect, too perfect." "I don't understand," said her assistant, looking confused. "Imperial technology follows mathematical principles exactly," explained Dr. Martin. "There's no randomness, no variation. That's their weakness." She pointed to a new weapon design on another screen. "We've added deliberate imperfections to our new plasma cannons. The energy signatures fluctuate in ways Imperial shields can't predict or adapt to." "But doesn't that make our weapons less efficient?" asked the assistant. Dr. Martin smiled. "Yes, by about 8%. But it makes them nearly impossible for Imperial systems to counter, because they can't predict the fluctuations." President Garcia reviewed the latest battle reports with his military advisors. The news was mixed. Earth had lost control of 2 outer colonies, but Daniel's guerrilla campaign was causing significant damage to Imperial infrastructure. "The Empire is getting frustrated," said Intelligence Director Phillips. "They've committed 3 times the forces they initially planned to use against us, and they're still struggling to contain our attacks." "What about civilian casualties?" asked the president. "Minimal on both sides," replied Phillips. "We've been targeting infrastructure, not population centers. The Empire is doing the same, hoping to force our surrender without creating martyrs." "They still don't understand us," said Admiral Taylor, who had joined the meeting via secure video link. "They think we'll eventually calculate the odds and surrender, because it's the rational choice." At Proxima Centauri, Earth's closest colony beyond the solar system, Commander Ryan Peters prepared for what would become the turning point of the war. His small fleet of 30 ships faced an Imperial armada of over 100 vessels. "We can't win this conventionally," he told his captains during their final briefing. "So we won't fight conventionally." Imperial Admiral Cross, who had replaced the executed commander from the Battle of Mars, positioned his ships in the theoretically perfect formation developed over millennia of Imperial warfare. His massive command ship, the Fist of Axion, sat at the center of a complex geometric pattern designed to maximize firepower while optimizing shield coverage. "The humans have nowhere to retreat," Cross told his officers confidently. "Our formation is mathematically perfect. Victory is certain." When Peters' fleet emerged from behind Proxima Centauri's largest moon, they didn't form a defensive line as Imperial doctrine anticipated. Instead, they arranged themselves in a pattern that Imperial tacticians later called mathematical heresy. "What are they doing?" asked Cross's tactical officer in confusion. "Their formation provides minimal defensive coverage and suboptimal firing solutions." Cross studied the human arrangement with growing unease. "It's a trick. They're trying to confuse our targeting systems." He was partly right. Peters had arranged his ships in a pattern that made no tactical sense by Imperial standards, but the formation wasn't designed for maximum firepower. It was designed to create psychological impact. The human ships moved in ways that seemed random, but followed subtle patterns that disrupted Imperial command structure rather than Imperial ships. Junior officers trained to follow exact protocols hesitated when faced with actions that didn't match any scenario in their training. "Fire at will," ordered Cross, but his targeting officers were struggling to predict human ship movements that defied standard evasion patterns. Peters' voice came over the Imperial communication channels. "Attention Imperial Fleet. Your ships at coordinates 227-384-991 and 1116-773-224 have shield generators operating at dangerous resonance frequencies. Withdraw those vessels immediately or risk cascade failures." It was a bluff. Peters had no way of knowing the shield status of individual Imperial ships, but 2 vessels immediately broke formation to run diagnostics, creating gaps in the Imperial line. "Maintain formation," Cross screamed, but it was too late. The perfect geometric pattern was broken, and Peter's ship struck precisely at the weak points. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Imperial Armada had lost 37 ships and retreated in disarray. Peter's fleet had lost 12 vessels but held their position at Proxima Centauri. On the diplomatic front, Earth had found an unexpected ally in Grace Wilson, a diplomat who had studied alien psychology before the war. Wilson traveled secretly through Imperial territory, meeting with representatives of subjugated species. "Humans don't want to destroy the Empire," she told a gathering of Nera elders in a hidden meeting place on their homeworld. "We want to transform it. For millennia, your people have been forced to follow Imperial ways of thinking. We're fighting for the right of all species to follow their own paths." The message resonated with many species who had long resented Imperial hierarchy. Passive resistance campaigns spread throughout the Empire. Supply shipments were delayed. Information became unreliable. Imperial officers found they could no longer depend on the perfect efficiency that had been the hallmark of Imperial rule. On Axion Prime, the Imperial Council was in crisis. Younger members, led by Sub-Administrator Neelix, argued openly for negotiation with humans. "They fight differently," Neelix warned the Council during a heated session. "Their strength isn't in numbers or technology, but in constant adaptation. Our doctrines become outdated the moment we implement them." High Administrator Zyrex, who had ruled for over 200 years, refused to consider compromise. "We have faced rebellious species before," he said dismissively. "All were eventually brought to heel. When the Nera openly refused to provide ships for the next offensive against Earth, Zyrex made a fateful decision. "The Nera homeworld will serve as an example," he announced to the Council. "Prepare the planet crackers." Despite protests from Neelix and other Council members, Imperial warships bombarded the Nera homeworld, killing millions. The atrocity became known as the Nera Genocide, and news of it spread rapidly throughout Imperial space. The effect was opposite of what Zyrex had intended. Instead of inspiring fear, the massacre galvanized resistance. Species that had been neutral now openly supported human efforts. Earth forces, joined by rebel Imperial factions, launched Operation Lighthouse, simultaneous attacks on 7 critical Imperial command centers. The operation's success demonstrated that humans had thoroughly infiltrated Imperial communication systems. As the third year of war began, the mighty Axioni Empire, which had ruled a third of the galaxy for 15,000 years, found itself fighting not just against humans but against the very foundation of Imperial power, the belief in the superiority of perfect order over adaptation. 3 years of war had transformed the mighty Axioni Empire into a fractured shadow of its former self. 42 species had declared independence, forming alliances with humanity. Once bustling trade routes lay empty, and Imperial military outposts that had stood for thousands of years now orbited in silence, abandoned by their crews. On the bridge of the UES Democracy, the largest human warship ever built, Colonel Steve Mitchell watched the tactical display with careful eyes. At 42, Mitchell had seen more combat against the Axioni than any other human commander. His face bore a long scar from a close encounter with Imperial forces 2 years earlier. "Status report," he said to his bridge crew. "Coalition fleet, in position," replied Lieutenant Kelly Anderson from the tactical station. "All 97 ships reporting ready." Mitchell nodded. His fleet was a remarkable sight, human vessels flying alongside ships from 24 formerly Imperial species. Each had their own unique design, reflecting the cultures now free to follow their own paths. Together, they formed the largest non-Imperial fighting force the galaxy had ever seen. "Open channel to all ships," Mitchell ordered. He stood straight, as the communications officer nodded to indicate the channel was open. "This is Colonel Mitchell. Today we strike at the heart of the Empire. For 3 years we've fought not just for Earth but for the freedom of all species to determine their own futures." He paused, looking at the distant star that marked their target, Axion Prime, the Imperial capital. "The Empire believes in perfect order. They think they can predict our every move because they've calculated all possibilities. Today we show them once again that the greatest strength isn't in rigid perfection, but in adaptation and cooperation. Coalition fleet, prepare for jump on my mark. On Axion Prime, High Administrator Zyrex stood in the Imperial Command Center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the remains of his once great empire. At over 400 years old, he had ruled longer than any previous administrator, overseeing millennia of stability. Now, in just 3 years, it was all crumbling. The human coalition fleet has been detected moving toward the Grendar sector, reported General Vrock, his chief military advisor. Likely another raid on our supply lines. Zyrex's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of his frustration. They're being too cautious. Why haven't they attacked the capital yet? They know our defenses are too strong, replied Vrock. The orbital platforms alone have enough firepower to destroy their entire fleet. Zyrex moved to another display showing a massive spherical object under construction in a hidden facility. How soon until the Void Arsenal is ready? 3 days, Administrator. Once operational, we can target Earth directly. The weapon will collapse their sun into a black hole, destroying their entire system. Zyrex nodded with satisfaction. Humans have been clever, but they've only delayed the inevitable. Once Earth is destroyed, the rebellion will collapse. Neither noticed the small communication technician who quietly left the room. The technician, whose name was Vreel, had been secretly working with the human resistance for months. He hurried to a secure location and sent an encoded message to Grace Wilson, who had become the primary liaison between Earth and rebel Imperial forces. Wilson received the message while aboard a Nera ship near the edge of Imperial space. Her face grew pale as she read it. "We need to contact Colonel Mitchell immediately," she told the Nera captain. "The Empire is preparing to deploy the Void Arsenal. They're going to collapse our sun." Back on Earth, Dr. Olivia Martin was working with her team on a critical project when she received Wilson's warning. The Void Arsenal was an ancient weapon system, thought to be only a legend until now. "We need to accelerate our timeline," she told her assistant. "Upload the virus to all Coalition ships immediately." For months, Martin had been developing a sophisticated computer virus designed to infiltrate Imperial systems. Unlike standard human viruses, this one contained deliberate errors and seeming inefficiencies that made it invisible to Imperial detection algorithms, which were programmed to look for perfect, efficient code. "What if they've changed their security protocols?" asked her assistant. Martin shook her head. "They can't. Their entire technological philosophy is based on mathematical perfection. Changing it would require them to rethink their entire civilization, Indies." Deep space, Colonel Mitchell's fleet suddenly changed course. Instead of heading toward the Grendar sector as Imperial observers had predicted, they jumped directly to Axion Prime through a route Imperial strategists had deemed too dangerous for rational beings, due to its proximity to an unstable neutron star. "They're here," shouted General Vrock as alarms blared throughout the Imperial Command Center. "They've somehow bypassed our outer defense grid." Zyrex couldn't believe it. Impossible. No ship could navigate that corridor without being torn apart by gravitational forces. "Human ships are reading unusual energy configurations," reported a sensor officer. "They've modified their shield harmonics to ride the neutron star's radiation waves instead of fighting against them." Outside, Mitchell's coalition fleet faced the formidable Imperial Home Defense Force. 300 warships arranged in a perfect spherical formation around the capital world. "All ships, execute the earthly doctrine," Mitchell ordered. What happened next confused Imperial observers completely. Instead of forming a battle line, the coalition ships broke into seemingly random groups. Some accelerated toward the Imperial fleet at suicidal speeds. Others appeared to flee in random directions. Some simply stopped moving altogether. "What are they doing?" demanded Zyrex. "There's no logic to their movements. Our targeting systems are having difficulty predicting their trajectories," reported Vrock. "And our ships are receiving strange commands through secondary channels." This was the virus at work. Created by Dr. Martin, it had been transmitted to Imperial ships through their own communication network. Imperial technicians, trained to follow exact protocols, had unwittingly helped spread it by running standard diagnostic procedures. As the Imperial fleet struggled to respond to the chaotic human attack, Mitchell's real strategy became clear. The random movements were a distraction. A small group of specialized ships had broken through the Imperial formation and were heading directly for the orbital defense platforms. Led by Commander Nina Parker, these ships carried infiltration teams, comprised of humans and members of various alien species who had once served in Imperial forces. Docking successful, Parker reported as her ship attached to the main defense control station. Infiltration teams deploying now. Inside the station, the teams moved quickly, facing minimal resistance. Imperial security forces, trained to respond to specific threats in specific ways, were completely unprepared for the mixed species attackers who used unpredictable tactics. Meanwhile, on Axion Prime itself, High Administrator Zyrex made a desperate decision. Activate the Void Arsenal immediately. Target Earth Sun. But sir, protested a technician, the system hasn't completed final calibration. Now, Zyrex demanded. Deep within the planet, ancient machinery hummed to life as the Void Arsenal powered up. But when the technicians attempted to input targeting coordinates, they discovered that their systems had been subtly modified. Something's wrong, reported the chief weapons officer. The targeting system is locked on our own fleet. This was Laura Peterson's work. As the lead engineer in Dr. Martin's team, she had created a virus specifically designed to turn the Void Arsenal against the Empire itself. As panic spread through Imperial Command, Zyrex's personal guard, led by Commander Vrax, made a decision that would change galactic history. They turned their weapons on their own leader. We have served the Empire for generations, Vrax announced on Imperial channels as Zyrex was taken into custody. But the Empire no longer serves its people. The humans have shown us another way. Within hours, fighting had ceased across the Axioni system. Imperial ships, receiving conflicting orders and seeing their leadership in chaos, began to stand down. 2 days later, in a ceremony aboard the UES Democracy, President Garcia and Admiral Taylor accepted Zyrex's formal capitulation. The Axioni Empire, after 15,000 years of galactic dominance, ceased to exist. Let this be a new beginning, said President Garcia to the assembled representatives of 87 species. Not an empire ruled by perfect order, but a confederation united by respect for diversity and the right of all beings to follow their own paths. As the surrender document was signed, the elderly Admiral Taylor leaned closer to Colonel Mitchell. We never wanted to rule the stars, she said quietly. We just wanted the freedom to explore them in our own way. Mitchell nodded, watching as former enemies became allies. Perhaps that's the most human quality of all, he replied. We don't follow the path, we make it. News of the Empire's fall spread quickly across the galaxy. Imperial holdouts and other spacefaring civilizations received the same message from former Imperial commanders. If humans come, do not fight. Do not resist. Run if you must, but better to talk. They fight like no species we have encountered in 15 millennia. 20 years later, the Galactic Confederation had become a thriving alliance of diverse species. Earth, once a primitive newcomer to interstellar politics, stood at its center, not as conquerors but as innovators who had shown the galaxy a new way forward.